So this is the third in my little series in which I've been looking at not voting as an option. And I know I've been criticised for not voting. And as you will have seen, if you've seen the other two videos in which I've been desperately trying to vocalise ideas, just ideas. I'm not trying to tell people how we should run the country or how we should do things. I'm just trying to give people ideas so that we have an open mind about the whole situation. And you can say, Richard, it's pointless, it's a waste of time, shut up. You can say whatever you like. But there may be some open-minded people out there who say, actually, you've got a point, really, that the two-party system that we keep voting for is actually, yes, it's so corrupt, it no longer works. And I would argue it never really has worked for the people. It seems always to have worked for the elite. And now I'm saying more than ever that we should be considering a completely different system, and that trying to get people in, whether it's Andrew Bridgen or whether it's Nigel Farage, into Parliament, I don't think it's going to make any difference. And you may have seen in a previous one, I likened Parliament and the whole government system as being the Titanic. The Titanic is on a course to hit an iceberg. It's going to hit the iceberg come what may, because the iceberg has been put there by the people above government, the Luciferians, the dark forces, the Bank of Rome, the Club of Rome, the Bank of International Settlements, you know, all of that, the Freemasons, the people who pull the strings. It's going to hit the iceberg. That is the destination of the government, no matter. And it doesn't matter who you change, the captain, the crew, paint it a different colour, change the passengers. It's going to hit the iceberg and people are going to drown at the end of it. And I say we need a different vessel. And we looked briefly at the first one. I was talking about that governance should really come from the people in local areas. They should be making their decisions. And I want to get rid of the councils and let the people en masse make their own decisions. I think that's perfectly possible to do. It might be a bit awkward to begin with, but I think it's possible. The second one I was talking about, what would we do on a national level then if everything's being done locally? What would you do? And I put some ideas forward for what one could do for that. And of course, I've not written a script. I've not spent years thinking about this. I'm just trying to get people to think out of the narrow box. One of the things to add to that now, I want to say, and one of the things I said in the other one is I would get rid of the legal system altogether. So what would I replace the legal system with? Well, of course, trial by jury would be the system that we would use. Trial by jury is the only system, it seems to me, and a lot of people are advocating this, to bring it back to everything, where you are tried by your peers. Now, don't get confused with jury trials. That's a completely different thing, in which the judge is presiding over everybody, listens to the opinion and gives some power to the jury and then makes the decision. No. I'm talking about proper trial by jury, in which you, if you, for whatever reason, you're in front of the court, your court is made up of the jury, your peers, 12 just men and women, and they will make the decision. They become the judge and the jury. The judge is really just a convener. He convenes everybody together, and he is there really to keep the peace and keep the order and make sure it flows. But it's the jury that makes the decision. So let us just say, for the sake of argument, that there was a speeding offence. Now, I would have got rid of legislation, so there were no speeding offences anyway. But let's say that we still have these old systems in there that trial by jury could work out how you deal with it. So, for example, somebody has driven 80 miles an hour and it's been clocked by either witnesses or a camera that in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the night, he's driven at 80 in a 70 mile an hour zone. So he's been brought to the court and he's standing there, and his peers, 12 just men and women, are making the decision. Now, they will listen to all the evidence, and in this particular case, let's say it's 2 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody on the road, nobody's been hurt, there's been no loss, there's been no injury, nothing's happened to his car that it's turned it into a dangerous ramshackle that it might hurt anybody else in the future. So there really has been no crime. It's just this this little rule has been broken, that he drove faster than what somebody somewhere decided was the speed of that road. So the jury will sit there and probably will think, actually, as there has been no loss to anybody, there's no harm, it's just a bit of rule bending, you know, what difference does it make? The world is still turning, isn't it? Then most likely will say, well, there's no case to answer for. Different if you were doing 80 in a 30-mile-an-hour area, you could say, whoa, that's going a bit too fast for the area, because there's people, there's children, anything could happen, and you could definitely have a case. But 2 in the morning on a motorway, what difference? What difference has happened? Then you might say, well, okay, so they let him off. But they also can look at the actual rule itself and say, hang on a second, do we need this rule? Do we need to have it that at 2 in the morning that it would be the same as perhaps rush hour when their volume of cars are in the morning? Perhaps we don't need that rule. Perhaps it doesn't make any difference. If you can just drive safely, you're not causing loss, harm or injury, then it doesn't really make much difference. So why have the rule in the first place? So I would most definitely put in trial by jury. So you're changing the rules, the jury are changing the rules, as well as trying the individual and saying, actually, there is nothing to answer. So I think that that would be one way in which, on a national level, you could make a big difference to people's lives by getting rid of so many of these little misdemeanors. Now, as I said in the previous one, I wouldn't even have legislation in there. Trial by jury would be the way to determine each and every case whether there is anything wrong. And then they would also decide what the punishment would be. Now, of course, in the old days, they may have chopped off your head or had you hanged and things like that. But they may decide, you know, depending on your circumstances, who you are, what it is. You don't necessarily need some sort of rule book, I think, which they have and say, well, we're going to send you to prison and all of that. I would have also got rid of the bar guild, thank you very much, you know, with the barristers and the solicitors and all their sort of nonsense where they're taking an oath to the private bar guild. I would have got shot of all of that. That private legal system would have gone completely, that actually it's down to ordinary men and women in their locality to decide if somebody had done something wrong. Let's say somebody had abused a child, or they'd murdered their wife, or they had pushed somebody under a bus, or they had threatened nasty stuff, or they had behaved abominably. The jury would be the one that would make the decision. And they would come from the locality, they would come from the area, and they would know what would be the appropriate thing. And by bringing that system back in relation to a whole new way of governing the country, in which people are part of the whole thing, they are contributing, not just by council tax, not just by taxing them to death, but by getting people back involved in their local communities, by getting people to make the decisions in their local communities, by getting people to be proud and have ethics and have morals again. Then when you've got your peers coming in saying, actually, I think what we could do with this individual is we'll do this with him, or we'll do that with him, I think they'll have much more relevance. And people will want to keep a cohesive society. That's what I believe. Now, you may disagree, and of course, I'd love to hear your views on what kind of society that we could possibly have. But I think that trial by jury would be an essential cog in a new way of, and it's tried and tested. That's the thing. It's not as if it's never been done before. It's tried and tested. And we, you know, people used to do this and it was working. People would respect their elders. They would respect the people who were coming there. They would have to respect the people they live with, so that in the end, behavior becomes something that people agree between themselves to adopt. They don't need policemen coming in and saying, this is how you must behave, or judges coming in saying, this is what the law is. People make the law themselves. They agree by consent. They agree by mutual decision how things should play out, not by somebody above them, or at least pretending that they're above them, making an overall rule, an overarching rule that doesn't work in those towns and those villages, that doesn't work over here. It might work over here for some people, but not for everybody. The people need to make the decisions for their lives, and those people who spoil it, the people need to be able to make the decision for those what's going to happen, and give them a chance and say, look, well, if you don't change your ways, this is what we'll do with you. Let the people take back the control so that we are responsible for our lives, that we make those decisions, and that we hold the standards, not that somebody else tells us what we should be doing.